Released in the year of the Sex Pistols' final gig at the Winterland Ballroom in San Francisco, Quadrophenia is not an obvious choice for a family film. But here we are almost 45 years later with the world still debating whether this gloriously nostalgic drama about teenage mod revival in the mid-60s qualifies as a classic. Personally, I think it does. And if you don't believe me, just look at how many films have tried to emulate its style over the years. From Sid and Nancy to This Is England to the sadly underappreciated The Last Days of Disco. In my opinion, what makes Quadrophenia such a great film is that while it's very much a period piece, it has a timeless quality to it. It tells the story of Jimmy, an unhinged teenager who is obsessed with becoming a mod. In case you need the backstory, mods were a subculture that emerged in the mid-60s amongst working-class youth in Britain. They took their name from the word modernists, and were known for their clean-cut style, their love of soul music, and their devotion to fast scooters. When they first appeared on the scene, mods represented a move away from the hippie culture of the late 60s. They rejected the flower power ethos, and instead focused on the latest fashion trends and the pursuit of physical fitness. Jimmy is already a mod when we meet him, and he's played by Phil Daniels. We also meet his two best friends, the dim-witted but likable Dave and the charismatic Spike. Together, the trio get up to all kinds of mischief, like pulling off elaborate robberies at department stores. But Jimmy's real ambition is to one day own his own scooter. Scooters were the mod's preferred method of transport, and the fastest ones were made by the Italian manufacturer Vespa. So Jimmy had to make do with a second-hand model. He saved up enough money to buy one by working after school as a T-boy at a local factory, but when he finally tracked down the seller, he learned that the scooter had been sold to someone else. Desperate to get his hands on it, Jimmy followed the new owner home and stole it while he was asleep. Now, it's at this point in the film that things start to unravel for Jimmy because, as it turns out, the scooter was owned by the local dealer of the rival rockers gang. And now that he's stolen it, Jimmy has unwittingly declared war. For those of you unfamiliar with British gang culture in the mid-60s, let me explain. Mods and rockers were essentially two sides of the same coin. They came from similar backgrounds and shared similar interests, but they couldn't be more different in terms of attitude and style. The mods worshipped the Italians, the French, and all things continental. The rockers were more insular, while the mods favored scooters, the rockers rode Triumphs, BSAs, and matchless motorcycles. Instead of Italian suits, they wore leather jackets and drainpipe jeans. Where the mods listened to soul and funk, the rockers were into rock and roll. While the mods loved nothing more than dancing at the local the rockers would spend their time boozing it up at the pub and fighting the police. The film cleverly intercuts between scenes of Jimmy stealing the scooter and the arrival of the rockers in Brighton. At the wheel of their motorbikes, they caused chaos wherever they went, terrorizing the locals and crashing into parked cars. It was as if they were trying to attract as much attention to themselves as possible, and when they weren't wreaking havoc, they could be found brawling with the police. The police were clearly overwhelmed by the sheer number of them, and there was little they could do to stop the rockers. Running riot, it was a time when the police were significantly outnumbered and outgunned. These guys literally had no other motive other than to cause trouble. If this sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, consider this. In April 1964, thousands of rockers descended on the seaside town of Brighton for the opening of the Mods and Rockers Week. It was hoped that the event would raise money for the local St. Wilfrid's Hospital. Unfortunately, it didn't quite work out like that. The rockers rampaged through the town, attacking people, smashing windows and burning cars. The climax came when 200 policemen were needed to restore order after a fight broke out at the Grand Hotel. One officer was even stabbed in the neck. That event inspired the infamous Battle of Brighton depicted in the film. After being chased around Brighton by the rockers, Jimmy takes refuge at the beach huts where he meets a young woman called Jane. They quickly fall for each other, and although she's initially apprehensive about their relationship, eventually agrees to go on a date with him. Unfortunately, Jimmy is too embarrassed to tell her that he doesn't actually have a job, so he pretends that he's a fireman. To his horror, he's then invited to meet her parents, who naturally assume that he works for the fire brigade. Not wanting to disappoint, Jimmy decides to go all out and lie that he's the chief fire officer. As he walks towards the house, the camera follows him from underneath, mirroring the point of view of someone looking up at him in admiration. And speaking of admiration, I cannot speak highly enough of the cinematography of this film. Every frame looks like a painting. From the wide shots of Brighton's palace peer to the close-ups of Jimmy's face. Every shot is composed beautifully. It is the kind of cinematography that makes you want to pause the film just to take in the visuals. This is the directorial debut of Frank Rodam, and he did such a good job that he won the British Academy Award for Best New Director. Anyway, at the party, Jimmy's lies catch up with him, and her father sees through him. A fight nearly breaks out, but Jimmy's quick thinking stops it from escalating. Later on, he apologizes to Jam for lying to her, and she forgives him. Afterwards, the two share a kiss on the pier as fireworks explode in the background. It's a tender moment that highlights the contrast between the two characters. Jam is bright and bubbly. Jimmy is dark and brooding. Their relationship may not work out in the long run. but at least they gotta share one special night together. Back in London, Jimmy's world continues to spin out of control. After being beaten up by the rockers, he starts taking pills to help with the pain. One night he takes too many and accidentally overdoses. His friends are worried that he might die, so take him to the hospital. Fortunately, he pulls through, but he soon learns that his condition has worsened. In fact, they've made everything worse. Now virtually blind, Jimmy is sent home to await an operation. He spends his days listening to music and drinking with his friends and reliving memories of happier times. He's lost interest in the mods and the scooter. All that matters to him is getting his sight back. The film reaches its conclusion with Jimmy undergoing surgery. As the operation gets underway, we see flashbacks to various key moments in his life. The first is of Jimmy as a child standing next to his mother. She was clearly a big influence on him and instilled in him a love of music. The next is of Jimmy and his mates riding their scooters along the beach. It's almost like a memory within a memory. Jimmy is remembering the past through rose-tinted glasses. Finally, we see the moment when Jimmy first met Jam. She represented a way out of his dark and troubled world, but sadly, it wasn't to be. As the operation comes to an end, we can see that Jimmy has regained his sight. The last thing we see is a close-up of his eyes as they slowly adjust to the light. It's a perfect ending to a near-perfect film. What do you think? Is Quadrophenia a classic, or do you think it's overrated? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me. Thanks for watching.